Hey guys, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am your host, Aaron Freeman, here talking with a pair of Bucks podcast hosts, doing some cross promotion on the podcast. Here I have Brent Allen and Ren over at the Pewter Cast. They're going to be talking with us about the Bucks offseason. Obviously, the Bucks have made some big moves. They'll get their thoughts on what the Falcons have done and whether or not that puts a little bit of fear in the hearts of Bucks Nation out there. Get some thoughts on other moves going on in the NFC South with Carolina and New Orleans. So definitely some straight NFC South talks. Guys, I want to welcome you to the show. How you doing tonight?
We're doing great, Aaron, man. Thanks so much for having us on.
All right, so we're talking Bucks. We got to talk Tom Brady. TB12 now in TB in 2020. I can't talk. Too many T's. But what are your guys' thoughts on that move? And, are you now feeling very confident about the Bucks' chances heading into the season?
Well, Brent and I have gone on record many times on the Pewtercast that we were Jameis guys. Like, we really wanted this to work out. But, when Miss Universe knocks on your door, like, what do you tell your wife? You know what I mean? So, that's sort of where we are. Everyone's very excited. Already the media coverage that we've gotten is just not what we're used to. Sense of course, everyone knows what's going on with the virus. They did, the first time we heard from Tom Brady was just 2 days ago. It was a conference call. And they invited all these media members there, and they put it on their app and also, on their website where fans could just listen in. But, we had people from the LA Times, 3 people from Boston, like The Athletic, The Globe, somebody from USA Today. Like, that's not, Brent and I have actually been to training camp. Like, we've been in the media room. Like, those guys never are there. So that's just a little bit different. As far as, how excited we are, or, hey, puffing out our chests and peacocking and look out, we're the new kings of the NFC South. That remains to be seen, because, we haven't had a lot to crow about for a very long time. But
Ren, to be fair, we've done that 3 out of the last 5 years and then gotten slapped back down with 5-11 records and 7-9 records and stuff like that. And so I hate to say we've learned a lesson, at least as podcasters, we've learned a lesson, but there certainly is this hope, this excitement, I think, going into the season that we haven't had before. And I think I'm speaking for the majority of Bucks fans when I say that, but there's still we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We've believed for a very, very long time that this team is not that far off. It's just never, like, we've all sat like at the end of the season and gone, how in the heck did we wind up with a 5-11 season? Like it's baffling trying to figure that out, because everything looked so good. And we'll see what happens this year,
Yeah. Falcon fans are quick to point out anytime there is Bucks offseason hype. It's, it feels like it's been every year this decade, there's been Bucks offseason hype. But, now it's tough to say this time it's legit, because I feel like I've said that a couple of times over the last couple of years. But, you do make that change at the quarterback position, which we all know is the most impactful position. I sort of want to talk to you guys a little bit about, obviously Tom Brady's making all the big headlines, but I think sort of an underrated aspect of the Bucks offseason has they've mostly been able to keep their defense intact, and that really was the strength of their team. And the only reason, given all the turnovers that Jameis Winston had, that they were able to stay in a lot of games and be competitive, particularly given Jameis's propensity to turn the ball over in the first 3 minutes of the game and force you guys to play from behind. But, Ndamukong Suh resigned today. JPP was brought back. Shaq Barrett's under the franchise tag. You have a young secondary that's going to grow together. What are your thoughts on sort of the defense staying intact, and how critical do you think that is for the team's success to be able to build off of last season?
Yeah, the defense certainly was a different defense in the last 8 games of the season than they were in the first 8 games of the season, or really you could say the last 10 versus the first 6. The big difference, I think, between the end of the season and the beginning of the season, aside from it's a very young secondary. Like we've literally drafted our secondary twice, 2 drafts in a row. And it just took them that long. It's a new, last year was a new defensive scheme with Todd Bowles. It just took that much time to for the rookies to catch on and to figure out what was going on. The defensive front was off the chain from the word go last year, which was awesome. But when JPP came back, because he was out for the first bunch of games with a neck injury, and he came back after our bye week in I want to say it was week 7, Ren. He infused something into that defense. And all the stories that we heard about Ndamukong Suh and what he was bringing in with the veteran leadership around that defense. And then we had Shaq Barrett going off for 2, 3, 4 sacks sometimes in a single game. And we had Levante David, who is, in my opinion, the absolute most underrated linebacker in the entire NFL and has been for years. And hopefully he finally gets some recognition this year, given that the Bucs will probably have a lot more national TV coverage just because of the Tom Brady effect. But then you compare that with that young secondary that was up and coming. The idea that keeping this front 7 together is going to be impactful is huge. And, outside of the press conference when Bruce Arians said signing Tom Brady was our number 1 priority this offseason, every other time he's been at the podium, he said the number 1 priority is keeping the defense together. Like coming out of the final game, it was we're keeping this defense together. Keeping the defense together, get that moving. And, you can even go back and say, if you go back to when Bruce Arians started in his first year, look at their draft. It was all it was mostly defense. He came in and saw the number 1 problem on this team was the defense, and they focused on that first. He had his year experiment with Jameis Winston. Unfortunately, that didn't work out as much as we really wanted it to. Jameis certainly can put you in a hole, but Jameis also has the ability to pull you out of that hole if your defense can hold. And, unfortunately, sometimes Jameis can also put you back in that hole at the end of the game as well. So, who knows? But, I mean, Ren, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but, holding this defense together is huge.
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of just build off what Brent said. Bruce Arians made no bones about it. Shaq Barrett wasn't going anywhere, and we're keeping this defense together, and they've done it. Carl Nassib went to the Raiders. He was sort of discussed as the odd man out at the very beginning, and it ended up being true. And even the rotational players, Nacho, Nunez, Rocha, Bo Allen's gone. Yeah. But Nunez and Roches came back. And of course, we got Sue. Bo Allen moved on. But we got a guy we drafted in the 4th round last year, Anthony Nelson, who's like a Carl Nassib type, hustle guy, same build, same length in the arms, go all the time, Harry Stamper. So it's the pieces are still there. And it was
Golston as well.
And Will Golston as well. And Bruce Arians was very adamant about keeping that. And then what also makes Bucs fans excited, besides the secondary growing up, and if you kind of look at what Jamel Dean and what Sean Murphy Bunting and who am I forgetting, Brent? Who's the other guy?
Carlton Davis.
Carlton
Mike
Davis.
Edwards. We got Jordan Whitehead, all those guys, which I'm sure Falcons fans know these guys by name.
Yeah, exactly. but those corners I was talking about, Sean Murphy Bunting, Jamel Dean, both rookies, and Carlton Davis, who was only his 2nd year. If you look at the second half of the season and go to these next gen stats or PFF, like all these guys rated really high. And then with a slow start from Devin White, he hurt his knee. He missed some games. Then he came back, had a knee brace. But then, sort of like the end of the last 6 games, you kind of saw what this kid's going to be. He won NFC Defensive Rookie of the Week twice.
It was the month.
Oh, the month twice. The last 2 months of the season. And so, as far as defensive, we're kind of ready to rock and roll. You look at this roster, there's not that many holes. And I think it's, as an optimistic Bucs fan, and you bring in, Tom Brady, the GOAT, like it's really hard not to get excited. Like playoffs are like minimum. That's it. And no one's talking Super Bowl now, but we're all thinking it. Like we're all thinking it with the weapons. And if that defense can just stay right where they were and start to progress in year 2 under Todd Bowles, we're a tough out. it's a tough out.
You guys talk about, a pretty stacked roster. I'm looking at a couple of positions where it seems like the Bucs could use a little bit of help, not necessarily a major overhaul. I think, free safety might be a spot that you could potentially address. You could upgrade over Justin Evans. Running back, you maybe want to get another running mate with Ronald Jones. But I think a lot of people are looking at that offensive tackle position where you guys are picking at 14, getting a right tackle. I read an article on ESPN today talking about the Bucs being a possible trade partner with the Redskins to acquire someone like a Trent Williams. Are you guys particularly interested in that type of move? Is that sort of a cherry on top? Is that a sort of a foolhardy dream, or whatever the case may be? What are your thoughts on possibly going after Trent Williams?
Well, we'll see. There's only so much money in the coffers. And I think if you add the rookie pool and sort of the $2-3 million injury money you need in the season, the Bucs are kind of around $8 million right now. So I don't know if Trent Williams signing is on the horizon, especially where you mentioned where we're drafting at 14, and there's a strong possibility one of the big four will drop to us as far as talking about offensive tackles, because we do have a huge need at that right tackle spot. But there's some guys, too, that you could trade back, or if you feel comfortable with, in that first round. Like 6-7 tackles might go in this first round. So if not one of the big four doesn't drop to us, we could go back and get Jones out of Houston. The kid from TCU always messes his name up. It's Neeg or Weeg. He had a real bad hip injury, and his 2018 tape was awesome. So, and then you got, of course, Jackson out of USC, and then the Prince guy at Auburn. So Buck fans really think that tackle position is going to be fixed either through a trade, a free agent. We've already brought in a guy that could kind of a jack of all trades from Indianapolis, who started games everywhere except center. So we got our day one, if everything falls apart, starter, right there already. But you talked about safety. Mike Edwards, Brent just talked about, was drafted last year. He did not progress as fast as Sean Murphy-Bunting or Jamel Dean, right, but they have high hopes on him. They really like him. Also, a kid that was in training camp that was starting to light it up, but got hurt, and they put him on IR right away, was Dakota Dixon, a safety out of Wisconsin they had there. Justin Evans hasn't played in almost 2 calendar years now because of ankle and foot injuries. We're going to see where he's going to be. And then Whitehead's just, like you said, he's not a free safety. He's more of a strong safety. And then just to, top it off and talk about the running back, Ronald Jones probably had the worst season as an NFL running back as I can remember anyone ever having as a rookie. And last year he was just average. It was great for us fans to see that, okay, he's not a complete bust, but he wasn't anything special. He has problems picking up the blitz, and he's not exactly I would say a top tier pass catcher out of the backfield. And Bruce Arians has talked about trying to fill that role. Somebody you guys just let go. Freeman might be in that conversation. A lot of people are talking about Thompson out of Washington to fill that role, or the draft, which is a second round, where like it seems where the Akers and the Stewarts and the Swifts and the Hilairs are all sort of starting to fall the end of the first round and the top of the second, and I would not be surprised if it goes offensive tackle, running back in the first, 2 rounds for the Buccaneers, and all those positions you talked about that, needed filling. Well, there they are, and figure out safety, because we brought back a guy, Andrew Adams. So now we're looking at 5 guys in 2 positions, and they've all started for us.
And don't forget, the Bucs also signed Keith Tandy, who Falcons fans should be familiar with somewhat
as a coach.
As a new coach, right? To bring him back. But I mean, just to add on to what Ren was saying there about those specific positions you mentioned there, Aaron. I mean, you just named them. Like, these are probably the biggest holes on our roster currently, and those are all positions that if you watch Bucs Twitter, you get some of these people who think they know more than the GM, but those are the positions that you don't draft in the first round. You don't draft a right tackle in the first round. You don't draft a running back in the first round. You don't draft, a few of these positions. So I'll be interested to see what the Bucs wind up doing and where they wind up going. I don't have a problem with drafting either one of those if it's the right guy, and we'll wait and see who they determine, because I tell you what, last year in the draft, they blew everybody's, busted everybody's mock drafts, like almost right out the gate of the second round. So I'll be interested to see, but you are right. Those are the positions that, the Bucks could still use an upgrade at, for sure.
So obviously this is Falcon Central Radio, and
Sure.
got to get people's thoughts on what the Falcons are doing.
Yeah.
Can't keep it all on the Bucks. You guys got more than enough media coverage here in this world. But what are your guys' thoughts on some of these moves that the Falcons have made? Picking up Todd Gurley at the running back position, making the trade for Hayden Hurst, former first-round pick from the Baltimore Ravens, signing Dante Fowler. I'm sure a guy that many of your Bucks fans are familiar from his days at Florida, to sort of spearhead the pass rush. Are any of those moves sort of stand out to you as not necessarily game changers, but something that's, certainly got your ears perked up and be like, okay, this is potentially going to be a challenge for the Bucks moving forward this year?
Yeah, the Todd Gurley one I find very interesting. A lot of people in Tampa talked about bringing Todd Gurley to Tampa, and then there's he's got the knee issue, and he's a really expensive contract, and blah 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 blah. As far as him, let's say he comes out and has a great year. Let's say he becomes a great runner. As far as we're concerned with Tampa Bay, nobody ran on us very well last year, and we kept that front seven together. So I think we are at least anticipating nobody's going to run on us. So even if you get like a top-notch Todd Gurley coming out, I'm not too particularly scared about it. What I find most interesting about Atlanta, and it's just one of those like graphics that I saw in like an NFC South Facebook group, it listed like all these people that Atlanta now has that were former first-round picks, like starting on offense. And it's like 9 out of your 11 players on offense. And it's like, wow, that's crazy how that happened. We'll see how it shapes out over the course of this year. Because you still have our good buddy Dirk Cutter up there, as far as I know.
Your favorite head coach, I'm sure Dirk Cutter,
so
and your second favorite head coach, and Raheem Morris, coordinating defense. So we're Tampa North up here in Atlanta.
Yeah, just to finish up what Brent was saying. I'll talk about Dirk Cutter first, I guess. Dirk Cutter is an excellent play caller. Don't get me wrong. You know what he's not good at? He's a terrible head coach. He was not interested whatsoever in developing players. He was not when you were ready to be a pro, then you could step on the field. That's kind of what happened to Ronald Jones and a few other players, where he was not a teacher. But as a play caller, he's top notch, and you can't really dispute that by the numbers. Mm-hmm. Raheem Morris, I'm glad to see that he switched back. He's back to the defense where he belongs. I expect big things from him. As far as how Buck fans view Atlanta, I'll kind of go back to what I said at the beginning. Like, we have no right to sort of like puff out our chest because we got a 42-year-old man behind center. Mm-hmm. We have had this roster. This roster's the same. The only person we signed besides Tom Brady was that guard from Indianapolis. It's the same roster. Mm-hmm. And now, you're saying things like, oh, you got a couple holes filled. But I think that's kind of a testament to Jason Light, and not all his drafting. It's his contract structure. We don't have to let go of these guys because we can't afford them. The way him and Mike Greenberg do these contracts were always in good shape. Even last year where, people were complaining, oh, you guys are terrible and you only have like $9 million. But we found Perriman, we found Shaq Barrett, and we found a couple other guys, and they filled in nicely, and Bruce Herons, and here we go. Now to talk about your free agents, Atlanta's good. Like, you've always had a good roster. You've had some key losses, be like Trufant, because of salary issues, but you always seem to figure it out. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and go on record and say, yeah, Hayden Hurst is an upgrade from Hooper. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I'm really scared of Todd Gurley because, we played him last year and he didn't do anything. And I don't know if he's healthier than he is. Is he a great back? Yeah. Could he go off for 250 yards against us twice? He could. Is he going to? No. So it's NFC South, man. Like, look at it. Look at these skill position players throughout the entire division, and it's crazy. Like, there are Pro Bowlers everywhere. Mm-hmm. The only, I guess, squad, if you're going to do offense, defense in the NFC South that is in real serious trouble, is the Panthers defense. Mm-hmm. They got a star-studded offense. You guys got a star-studded offense. of course, the Saints. The Saints defense is fine. Our defense is upcoming. We're very happy about it. I'm not exactly sure where you guys are on your defense or how you feel about them, but it seems to be an up and down year with your defense. Like one year, they do great, and you expect these big things to come, and the next year it kind of like falls off to the wayside. It feels, you guys, like you said, you're Bucs fans north. I feel you, man. Like we thought we had Mike Smith and we're going places. And the next year he goes and it's the worst scoring defense in the history of the league. And they still didn't fire him. So, it's being a fan in the NFC South is tough unless you're a Saints fan. And we don't like those guys anyway.
Yeah, we can agree on that. That's definitely true. You're talking about the NFC South. I'm curious to get your thoughts on sort of what the other teams have done. You have New Orleans didn't do a whole lot in terms of changing their roster, brought in some veteran players like Emmanuel Sanders, Malcolm Jenkins, DJ Swearinger, really was able to retain a couple of their own free agents and bring them back. Clearly, they're in sort of run it back mode. We're going to be back at the top of the division, competing for a Super Bowl sort of situation, and going after those veteran guys seems to be they're looking for, I guess, sort of that leadership that can help them get over the hump that they've, so entertainingly failed to get over the last couple of seasons. Right. You look at Carolina, they're kind of reshaping things. They've long been we had a Panthers podcaster on from Cat Chronicles last week and talked about how Carolina for basically the last decade of Ron Rivera was a defensive driven team. And now with the hiring of Matt Rule and bringing in Joe Brady and some of the additions they've made with Teddy Bridgewater replacing Cam Newton, Robbie Anderson being picked up at wide receiver, getting Russell Okung at the offensive tackle position, among other moves, seems like they're going to be more of an offensive-driven team in the near future and sort of going to have to rebuild that defense, losing players like Luke Kuechly, among others. So I'm curious to sort of see what are your guys' thoughts on, if one of you could talk Saints, one of you could talk Panthers, get your thoughts on what else is going on in the NFC South.
I'll let you pick, Brent.
I'll talk Panthers just because I used to live up in that area. The Panthers are, I think, the most intriguing team to me in the NFC South right now. And just in specific, like they seem to be the most unknown quantity, like at least for us as Bucs fans. Like we know the Bucs, we know what we have. It's really the same squad we have last year. It's just with Jameis, or it's with Tom Brady instead of Jameis, which makes us very excited. The Saints, as you mentioned, don't seem like they've changed it all. You guys are an interesting deal, but you have a lot of good stuff. But then there's the Panthers. They've lost Cam Newton. They've lost Luke Kuechly, arguably two of the heart and souls of their team. Those were the people who kind of, I think, made the Panthers who they really were as far as their attitude. And they've got the new head coach, and they've got the whole thing with the ownership change a couple of years ago. And they just sort of seem to be this just unknown quantity of who are they going to be and what are they going to be, and can they make that gel this year? And I don't see them as much of a threat. I mean, it's stupid to go in and just say, we don't have to worry about them this year. There's parity across the league. We know that. It's hard to win in the NFL, even against the worst teams in the NFL. It's still hard. So you can't sleep on them, but at the same time, to me, the Panthers are I'm just kind of letting them hang out, and I'm not thinking too much about them this year. I want to wait and see and see what happens with Teddy Bridgewater. Is he going to come back, and can he be a starting caliber quarterback, or is he going to be relegated more to that journeyman role that we sometimes see? For his sake, I hope he's good, just not against us, but we'll see. I think they're probably the most unknown quantity in the South right now.
Yeah, the Panthers are in total rebuild mode. Right now, Rule's just bringing in players that sort of fit what he wants his attitude adjustment to be, to fit his culture. He's bringing in like 2 or 3 ex-Temple players, an ex-FL quarterback who's now third down, but everything else Brent said, was spot on. As far as the Saints go, there's a few things. It's like you said before, they're just going to reload and go for it again. Mm-hmm. What I would look for as someone who wants to watch the Saints lose as much as possible because their roster's so goddamn good is I don't think that Breeze can throw the ball deep anymore. We saw it in the playoff game. Like, they wanted to throw the ball deep. What did they do? They brought in Taysom Hill. He threw the ball deep. They completed it. Breeze comes back in. It's going to be real interesting to see what that shoulder can do. I remember when they were down here and they beat us, obviously. But he tried to throw from far hash mark to the sidelines, and it was like an 18-yard out. And the first one he tried back-to-back plays. First one, he sailed it. He got it there, but he couldn't put any mustard on it. The second one, he tried to put mustard on it, and it should have been returned for a pick six by Sean Murphy Bunting because the throw was so late. Like, his arm just isn't what Drew Brees is. But you surround him, but it's kind of like the Peyton Manning at Denver effect, right? Mm-hmm. You surround him with all this other talent. I think they've got, 2 Pro Bowlers on their offensive line. They got Kamara. They got Thomas, might be the best wide receiver. They brought in, like you said, they brought in Emmanuel Sanders, and the defense just seems to be shuffling around and bringing in some veterans to kind of show the way. And once again, let's giddy up and jump on the horse and, one more time, one last time. And right. It's hard to count them out because of the head coach and because of the quarterback.
Okay. Well, guys, we have our next guest coming up on the show, and I appreciate you guys joining us and talking some NFC South, talking some Bucks. Obviously, we still got a lot more things to see with this offseason, with the draft coming up. I hope you guys will be open to joining us maybe after the draft and talking a little bit more about what some of the moves that the team made, whether they got that offensive tackle, whether they got that running back to sort of help, and one of the jokes we have here with the Falcons is whatever you expect them to draft, they will not do that. They will go in a completely different direction. We call it zigging when you expect them to zag, but we'll see if the Bucs can do that. But go ahead, plug the show, plug where, your Twitter, plug other platforms where you guys can be found.
Yeah, if you guys, want to check us out, follow everything going on in Tampa Bay, including with Tom Brady and all that kind of stuff, just find us at the Pewtercast. We're on all the major podcasting platforms out there. We have live shows that go out after the games and frequently throughout the offseason as well, which you can pick up those streams over on YouTube at youtube.com/thepewtercast. And then it's the Pewtercast across all the social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. And that's where you guys get a hold of us. And, certainly, Aaron, Ren, I'm speaking for you, I guess, when I say this, but we'd love to come back on and talk to you, and maybe we get you back over on our show and we'll talk about some Falcons stuff, because interested to see, where you guys are, as far as we're concerned. So, we'd love to be able to do that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Spoiler alert, I feel like the Falcons are in a similar shape as the Bucs were heading into Dirk Cutter's last season, where lots on the line.
Coaching to save their jobs. Coaching to save their jobs. Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys have been there. Obviously, you're hoping to come out better for it a couple of years later, and we'll see what the Falcons do, if they can sort of avoid the same fate that our beloved Dirk Cutter had in Tampa Bay, or whether or not we'll be getting probably not a quarterback like Tom Brady, but getting exciting about some big splash signing 2 years from now with a brand new head coach. But sure. We'll see how that goes. Guys, I really do appreciate you joining me tonight, and hope to do so again.
Thanks, Aaron. It was our pleasure.
Thanks, man.
All right, guys, we are joined by John McMullen, an Eagles insider. John, welcome to the show. How you doing tonight?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Self-quarantining like everyone, I assume.
Yeah. It's a interesting time, a busy time in the NFL. Glad that we have the NFL to sort of distract us from all the things that are going on in the real world. And I want to get your thoughts on sort of the Eagles offseason, and get your thoughts on what your perspective on the Falcons offseason, as well as maybe get your thoughts on some of these other NFC East teams. But, the big offseason move, and we just talked with the guys from the Pewtercast, Brent and Ren, about it, is the Tom Brady move down south to Tampa Bay. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on sort of that move, and what type of impact are you expecting for Tom Brady in the NFC South?
Well, I'm a little surprised. I thought if Tom was going to leave Foxborough, it would probably be for the LA Chargers for a couple of reasons. One, he just started that production company. I thought it might be that LeBron James type of theme where he starts looking towards the second phase of his life. And obviously, he wants to be in entertainment. Los Angeles would make sense from that perspective. And the Chargers, let's face it, they're one of the few NFL teams that needs a little bump when it comes to selling tickets, merchandising. They're clearly second in the market. So Tom Brady would have been huge from that aspect. Football wise, I don't think anything made sense other than Foxborough because you're talking about a 43-year-old quarterback when the season starts. And look, I'm on record. This is the greatest quarterback of all time. That said, he's still a 43-year-old quarterback starting in a new system, new city, the 6 Super Bowl championships, the 17 AFC East titles, all the AFC championship games. They don't come with him. This is just going to Tampa Bay, and we've seen this time and time again in the NFL going back to Johnny Unitas with the Chargers. You think about Joe Namath limping off the field as an LA Ram. You think about Emmitt Smith as an Arizona Cardinal. These things usually don't work well. That said, they're trying to go for the Peyton Manning thing. But even Peyton Manning, if you think about Peyton Manning, 2 years after 50 touchdowns, 600 points, MVP season, he was done physically. So when it starts, when it happens, the descent, it comes. I started it with Tom Brady last season. It's not going to stop. I don't think it's going to end well. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to end well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure a lot of the Falcon fans listening to the show are glad to hear you say that. Give some confidence that it's not going to necessarily upset the balance of the NFC South and put the Falcons near the bottom and sort of on the outside looking in, trying to win this division. But I do want to talk with you about the Eagles, but I do want to get your thoughts a little bit maybe on some of these Falcons moves. Obviously, the Falcons aren't on the Eagles schedule seemingly for like the first time in, seems like every year we play the Eagles, and those games come down to literally like the last play of the game. Finally, the Falcons sort of were on the winning side of that last year. But I'm curious, sort of looking at these 3 moves, if the Falcons and the Eagles were set to play in 2020, and looking at the addition of Dante Fowler and Todd Gurley and Hayden Hurst, those 3 big splashes for the Falcons. Sort of what of those moves do you feel like could potentially have the biggest impact in whether it's the Eagles or other teams in terms of impacting this upcoming season?
Well, I think people tend to default to skill positions, and understandably so. I think if you look at the Falcons, and you guys know, they've been looking for consistent pass rush for years. I think that's something that Dan Quinn has had on the forefront of his mind. It's been too inconsistent. So to bring in another edge rusher, and Fowler probably hasn't lived up to his billing as a former first-round pick, but he's still been very, very solid at that aspect of it. And I think if you add him to the mix, I think you get that more consistent pass rush. And that's what the NFL is about. Every coach will tell you, the modern NFL, every scout, every personnel person I talk to says it's about getting the quarterback or getting to the quarterback. So obviously quarterback is number 1 in everybody's purview. You need a quarterback to be consistently good in this league. We all understand that. Number 2 in this league, edge rusher. That's how important those guys are. So to get that consistent edge rush, I think is really, really important, not only for the Falcons, but every NFL team.
Now, edge rush hasn't been an issue for the Philadelphia Eagles in too long, if you ask me. But they really sort of needed to upgrade their secondary. They were able to get some interior help this offseason with the signing of Javon Hargrave. They were able to get that secondary help by making the trade for Darius Slay. They picked up Nickel Roby-Coleman earlier this week. They also got a linebacker from the Chargers in Jatavis Brown. I'm curious, sort of, what are your thoughts on those moves, and which of those guys do you feel like is going to be the biggest difference maker for the Eagles this year?
Well, unquestionably, Darius Slay. I mean, this is an organization that has struggled to find corners. It's been deficient really in this entire era, the Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz era. The Eagles have not had good corners. Even when they won the Super Bowl, they kind of cobbled it together. So the fact to get a Darius Slay type, who has been at times a top 5 corner in this league. Now, wasn't that last year? He's 29 years old, so you don't know if he's going to recover to that stage. But either way, this is, as I said, this is the best corner by far they've had in the Jim Schwartz era. So that opens up so many things, because if you have a corner that can handle himself out, help, all of a sudden that brings the blitz game more into it. You can do a lot of different things as far as overloads, as far as A-gap pressure. Eagles generally haven't been able to do that. It's been front 4 or nothing, because they need to protect the back end. So to get Darius Slay, and by the way, you mentioned Nickel as well. That's one of the better slot corners in this league. Kind of fell in the Eagles' lap. All of a sudden, they're really, really improved at the cornerback position, and that's huge for Philadelphia.
Now, I'm curious, you're talking about some of the weaknesses they've had in the secondary. They obviously lose Malcolm Jenkins. They were able to retain Rodney McLeod at the safety position. But, I've seen a lot of Eagles people talk about they got Slay, they got Roby, seemingly they got their 1 corner, they got their 3 corner, but they potentially have a hole at that 2 spot. Do you feel like that's a position they could address in the first round, or does the focus start to shift back to the wide receiver position, which I know has been a sort of high priority position for Eagles fans heading into this offseason?
Yeah, I joked it's 99.95% certainty the Eagles are going wide receiver in the first round of the draft for a couple reasons. One, it's really deep position, probably the deepest position in this draft. So there's going to be valuable guys at 21 overall, but also they have addressed some of the other needs, most notably corner. There's another glaring need at linebacker, but they don't value that position to take anyone at 21 overall, as most teams in the NFL do not, who play a 4-3. So it really centers on wide receiver, the best wide receiver available. That's the way they're going to go in the first round. They have enough bodies to cobble together that other outside corner position. They have Avonte Maddox, who's undersized but has competed well in the past. They're still hopeful Sidney Jones can turn the corner, and that's a really, really talented kid that was going to be a first-round pick till he tore his Achilles at his pro day. Eagles got him in the second round, hasn't developed like they wanted, but they're hoping he can turn that corner. And then even Rasul Douglas, he's on the trade market, but he's a big, lengthy corner, good ball skills, little speed deficient. But they have enough bodies to where if Slay plays like Slay can and Roby-Coleman handles the slot duties, they'll be fine. Like I said, this is a team that won the Super Bowl with below average corners. They can hold it. If they get Slay to play well and Roby-Coleman to play well, they'll be thrilled, and they'll figure out the rest.
Now, you talked about sort of sitting there at pick 21 and being in a prime position to get a pretty solid wide receiver. Expectations are, I think, at a minimum, people are sort of projecting 5-6 wide receivers to go in round 1. But a lot of the focus is on sort of those big 3 guys at the top: CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs out of Alabama. And I'm just curious, because I've been throwing around this prediction a little bit lately. If one of those guys starts to slide a little bit in the draft and is there chilling at pick 16, we know Howie Roseman's very aggressive when it comes to making trades and willing to move up and down the draft board to make sure they get their guy. We saw that last year with Andre Dillard when he started to slide. is there any chance you could see the Eagles sort of deciding, hey, giving the Falcons a call? We did that Duke Riley deal last September. Hey, how about you swap picks with us? We'll go up to 16, maybe, pull the trigger on a player like Henry Ruggs. Is there any hope that my dreams of the Falcons maybe trading back and getting a couple more picks and still being able to get a player at a position of need is possible with the Eagles?
I don't think they are in the mix to trade up this season for a couple reasons. One, they just gave up 2 picks for Darius Slay. They didn't necessarily want to do that because they're coming off consecutive years of only having 5 draft picks. So Howie kind of knows they have to get younger bodies. They need a number of bodies. They started the process with 10 picks. Now they're already down to 8. If you start talking about moving up again, you're down maybe at 6 again. And that's the last place they want to be as far as adding youth to this team. So that's number one. Number two, the position is deep enough to where you're going to get a Justin Jefferson type, someone of that nature at 21. So the concern, I think, is not so much about going up to get one of those 3. I think they kind of realize that's not going to happen. The team comes up because they know how wide receiver needy the Eagles are to jump up and take potentially the player they want. Minnesota would be the obvious category because they just traded Stephon Diggs. They need the replacement. They're sitting at 22 and 25. So I think that's the bigger concern from the Eagles' perspective.
Okay. Well, those dreams are over, so I will have to do my research to find another potential trade partner for the Falcons. But let's turn our attention a little bit to the NFC East and sort of, the Eagles obviously won that division thanks to a very strong finish by Carson Wentz at the end of the season with, a lot of, to most people, no-name players sort of around him. I'm curious, sort of, do you feel like the other teams in the NFC East have sort of closed the gap? We've seen Dallas try to beef up their D-line with pickups like Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy, get Clinton Dix in the secondary to sort of secure that safety spot. Although, they did lose Byron Jones. You saw the Giants pick up a cornerback in James Bradbury, get some help in the middle of that defense with Blake Martinez and Kyler Fackrell. Washington scooped up Thomas Davis, brought back Kendall Fuller. Are any of these moves sort of stand out to you? Any of these teams really sort of move the needle for you?
Well, I think much like last season, it's a bad division. It's still a bad division. And it's still a 2-horse race. It's the Eagles and the Cowboys. The Giants and the Redskins are still in that rebuild mode. I don't think there's any question about that. Washington, to me, huge advantage getting Ron Rivera in there as the head coach. Hopefully they can turn the corner a little bit, get going in the right direction. Giants as well. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, how quickly can they get going offensively? And they had so many holes defensively as well. I think that's a multi-year rebuild, have a new coach as well. So it comes down to the Eagles and Cowboys as it did last year, and I think it'll be very close. They're very similar teams. I think the Cowboys, if anything, are a little bit more talented. I think they probably would have won the division last year if Dak Prescott was healthy in that late season game. Remember, he had the shoulder problem. He had to take 2 injections just to get through the game. He was not himself. And the Eagles were able to run the table at the end of the season. And all NFC East run the table against bad teams, the Redskins, the Giants, and the Cowboys with a Dak Prescott who was not Dak Prescott. So you give the Eagles credit for doing what they were supposed to do, and it's not their fault. You can only play who's on your schedule, but you also have to be realistic about it and the fact that those teams were not very good at the end of last season. So maybe a little bit of fool's gold because the Eagles, to be honest, were probably not a playoff level team, but somebody from the NFC East had to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And, now with 7 playoff teams, maybe it's possible that 2 will do so. I saw a report, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, that the Redskins talked to Jason Peters. And I know the Eagles have sort of talked about bringing him back, but certainly given that they have a young offensive tackle in Andre Dillard, they have Jordan Mailata, they have Lane Johnson, not necessarily a need, but so it's going to be one of those things probably at the right price. I'm curious though, if Jason Peters was to wind up in Washington, potentially replacing someone like Trent Williams, would that sort of be, blasphemous from the Eagles' perspective to see a longtime fixture, a player that I personally feel like is deserving of Hall of Fame recognition when he does decide to hang up his cleats?
Yeah, I mean, Jason is going to be a Hall of Famer, no question about it. One of the best left tackles of all time. And we just talked about Malcolm Jenkins a little bit as well. It was a difficult offseason for the Eagles to say goodbye to a couple players who have been very important to their organization, both on the field and in the locker room as well. Jason's in that category. Jason's good friends with the owner, Jeffrey Lurie. I mean, he is one of the greatest Eagles of all time. But Howie Roseman, when he talks to us, has pointed out consistently, look, this happens all the time in this league. Unfortunately, you just saw it with Tom Brady. I mean, there's a 6-time Super Bowl champion, and he just changed teams. I mean, that's what the NFL is. You have to make difficult decisions. I just gave you some of the names: Unitas, Emmitt Smith, Joe Namath, Brett Favre, Joe Montana. Everybody's played for a different team. It's more rare when someone starts and finishes, which is why I was so hopeful that Tom Brady would finish in New England just to finish off that legendary career the way it should be. But a lot of times we don't get the fairy tale ending. That's the way it's going to happen with Jason Peters. He can still play. He was a top 10 left tackle in this league last year. Now, it's an offensive line deficient league. He's not nearly as good as he once was, but he's better than the majority of the left tackles in this league. So he wants to play. He should play, and he will play, I think, and he'll play well.
Okay. John, I really appreciate you coming on, talking some Eagles, talking some NFC East, getting your thoughts on some of the moves that are shaking up the NFC South. Hopefully we get an opportunity to talk again about all the stuff that's going on around the league. Go ahead and plug your Twitter if people want to get more information, any other platforms, any other places where they can find your work right here.
You can find me on Twitter at JF as in Frank McMullen. And you can listen to me every day on 97.3 ESPN in South Jersey, Philadelphia area. You can get our app, 97.3 ESPN. SI, Sports Illustrated. You can see me there at SI.com. So all over the place.
Thank you, John. Really do appreciate it. Hope we get another opportunity to talk soon. Be safe out there.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
So, guys, there is our show tonight. Not as much to talk Falcons as we did last week, but not a whole lot happened since last week. Technically, Todd Gurley signed, but we kind of talked about that on last week's show. If you missed it, go check out Pro Football Central's YouTube page to get my sort of quick thoughts on that, sort of interwoven in between that show. But we got more content coming on this channel here on YouTube, so you definitely want to like and subscribe so you can get that. If you missed it earlier tonight, my producer Brian, who is the proprietor of the Pro Football Central Radio Network, did his own show. Got to talk with Bucs defensive back MJ Stewart and new Cleveland Browns D tackle Andrew Billings. He did that on Periscope, so you definitely want to subscribe to PF Central on Twitter so you can catch that. But also, check out on YouTube. He'll be back on this platform in the future, probably leading into the show. So you definitely guys can get some great football content sort of to wet your whistle before we jump into Falcon-centric content on this show. And probably Thursdays nights is probably going to be a regular home for us for the foreseeable future. But in addition to doing the live shows on Thursday nights, hoping to drop some other content on this channel, hoping that, this weekend I'll get an opportunity to maybe do a film breakdown. Haven't decided whether or not I'm going to do Dante Fowler or Hayden Hurst or Ty Gurley, but I do want to get one of these big name free agents that the Falcons have picked up, and probably that'll be a sort of a weekend thing that we can add to the channel if you've missed it. We've done some draft interviews, did one earlier today with Cincinnati tight end Josiah DeGuara, yesterday with Charlotte pass rusher Alex Highsmith, hoping to get some more draft prospects to talk about and talk to, I'm sorry. And, check us out on Facebook, Falcon Central Radio there. Check us out on Twitter, Falcons PFC. Check me out on Twitter at FalcFans to get updates. And guys, hope you guys stay safe out there. We know it's a trying time, and hopefully football conversation and some more Falcons centric content right here on Falcon Central Radio will get you guys through this tough times out there in the world. So appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight, and we'll be back next week with more Falcons and NFL content.